Hello and welcome to the Cottage Wildlife Garden. I'm here in my summer house today doing some editing, and I was really thinking about the question, what is a wildlife garden? And the answer really is very difficult to say. It's hard to define what a wildlife garden really is. And I suppose every garden is a wildlife garden. Even a concrete yard can be improved by adding some flower pots, some water, and some refuges or bee hotels. So you can improve a garden, make it more appealing to wildlife. So I suppose really this video is investigating what I think a wildlife garden is. Let's see how we go. So why bother making a wildlife garden if all gardens are okay for wildlife? I think there's been some big changes, and a lot of the statistics actually bear this out. Now, a lot of people say, yeah, statistics. Lies, damn lies and statistics. However, some of them have been pretty much verified now. So we'll have a look at a few things that people are saying. So here's one from the Natural History Museum. It's basically saying centuries of farming, building and industry have made the UK one of the most nature depleted countries in Europe. The Royal Society says there's been a 13% decline in the average abundance of wildlife in the UK since the 1970s. Pretty serious. And the commonly quoted statistic that 97% of wildflower meadows have disappeared since the Second World War. Obviously, Second World War was a big thing. We needed food, but we've not put any of it back. Now, there's an interesting site called the Wildlife Gardening Forum, and I would encourage you to go and have a look at that. That's quite good. There's a good assessment on there of really how important gardens are and how they add up in the national picture. And here's a few more statistics, I'm afraid, but it just gives you that feel. UK gardens make up about 500,000 hectares of the UK. 500,000. That's about the fifth the size of Wales. There are 3.5 million ponds in the gardens, and that equates to a quarter of the size of Lake Windermere in the Lake District. And there's about 28 million trees in gardens, and added together that's as big as the New Forest. Estimated at 7 million bird feeders. Unfortunately, many of them are probably not filled up all the time, but if they were all full, that equates to about 2,500 tonnes of food available to birds. There's about 4 million nest boxes for them to breed in. So our garden's important for wildlife, for sure, definitely. Do we make our gardens the best we can for wildlife? Probably not. And that's really the thing that I look at, is how can I do it better, and how can I encourage other people to do it better? One little thing in each garden in the UK, and the effect would be enormous. So, what is the single most important ingredient in a wildlife garden? Personally, I think the most important ingredient is the gardener themselves. As gardeners, we have an incredible freedom. We can choose what to plant, what colour, what size, where to plant it, how big. And I think as we develop a garden, wildlife moves in automatically. And then there's a responsibility too, that the stuff we have planted, wildlife is becoming dependent upon. So I think we have a duty to try and make our gardens as good as possible for wildlife. So how can we do that? Well, water. Water is the single most important thing. All life on Earth needs water. So whether it's a dish filled with stones, whether it's a water feature, a wildlife pond, or a fish pond, all sources of water are important. The second thing is wilderness. Now, wilderness doesn't mean abandon your garden and don't go in it. It means managing it differently. Some people allow a bit of grass to grow long, some people plant meadow plants, and they don't cut their grass in May. There's various things you can do, and it's all good. But if you like a stripy lawn, that's great too. There are other things you can do though, like putting in log piles of stones for things to creep into, spiders, amphibians, reptiles, and of course compost heaps. Many gardeners use compost heaps for their own soil material, but other animals use it too. Worms, microbes, all healthy stuff for part of the ecosystem of your garden. The third thing are what I call wow flowers. These are flowers that work really hard in the wildlife garden. If you want to encourage the life cycle of butterflies and the life cycle of insects, bees, whatever in your garden, you need the flowers that they feed on. That's a little bit more complicated. But if you just want your garden to be a feeding station for bees, hoverflies, butterflies, many of the garden centre flowers are really, really good. You want nice open flowers where the pollen and the nectar can be reached, and if you can, extend the season from early spring with things like hellebores right through to late autumn with things like asters. And if you've got a good plant, you think that's really good, look at the bees on that, spread it, get some more, make some cuttings, split the plant, grow a swathe of it so that the insects can really use it. The fourth thing is pesticides. You go into all this trouble to make a wildlife garden and a refuge. You're trying to encourage stuff. Why would you use pesticides? Of course not. Of course you wouldn't. So throw them away. And then there's nest boxes, birds, bats, various things, and you can make a variety of nest boxes for birds, whether it's for robins, for great tits, blue tits, sparrows, owls. Yeah, a massive subject in its own right. Insect houses, whether it's a bee hotel or an insect refuge, you can buy these commercially, but to be honest, it's much more fun to make them yourself, and far more satisfying if you see them using it. And finally, I would have said, it's back to us, the gardeners. Let's observe the garden. Let's see what's going on. We don't need to know the names of all these insects and that. We just need to know they're there. And we can learn from it and just do a little bit more. So you've managed to improve your garden for wildlife, or you've started out again and started from scratch and made yourself a wildlife garden, what can you do with it? Well, the biggest thing is observe it, take note of what's there, investigate it, learn from it. Then, of course, you can photograph it, take pictures. You don't need massively expensive equipment. Most smartphones can make very good images these days, and then you can video it with the same device. Put videos together, turn yourself into a budding wildlife photographer. If that's not your medium, then you can draw it. If you like paper and pencil, sketch some bits of it. If you like drawing flowers, or if you're into painting, paint it. You'll have subject matter that will keep you going for years. But if you're into social media, your Facebook, Instagram, it's a great place to put some of your work and see what other people think. It's a reward for doing all the work that you've done. But there are also some very good websites, official websites, that you can record things on. For example, BTO, the British Trust for Ornithology, the Butterfly Conservation do a couple. One of them is an all year round garden survey. Many websites which would like your data, so you are actually becoming a citizen scientist and entering facts and figures into their sites, which gives a better view on wildlife as a whole. And your garden is playing a small part in that. But the biggest thing I would recommend is relax, enjoy it. Mental health will be far better from being immersed in nature. So we have to keep our gardens in perspective. A single wildlife garden is not going to change the world. Hundreds are, thousands will, millions will definitely help. But we also need it to be part of a network. In urban areas you need lots of these gardens so that wildlife can hop from one to another. In rural areas we need to keep farmland hedges, farmland woodland. Yes, we need food, but we need to make sure that the hedges are not grubbed out. And wildlife can then move along these hedges and move from woodland copse to woodland copse and then to your garden. Your garden will not be the place that wildlife only survives. It'll come and visit your garden. It may pass through your garden en route to somewhere else. So you have to think of it like blood vessels of the body, distributing food and oxygen to your body. So hedges, gardens and woodland help to distribute the wildlife. And I think if you look at it like that, that you're a small part, but an important part of a bigger concept. And really, I suppose, I said earlier on in the video, well, at the beginning of the video, I said, I'm not sure how you define a wildlife garden. I suppose I can sort of make a definition. And I would say a wildlife garden is where the gardener does more. And by more, I mean the M of more, standing for maximise the diversity. The O stands for observe and record. And the R, I would say, stands for recognise its importance, not just to you, to the area, but to the whole world in a way. And E, enjoy it.